Okay, nice.
All right, fantastic. So we're on to the fifth principle now.
Chill.
Chill indeed. So the fifth principle is the concept of how we're only supposed to serve Hashem. So we're going to unpack that. What does that mean? So reading the fifth principle from Perek, where the Rambam goes through the 13 principles. So he writes he writes the following. He says the fifth principle is that Hashem is the one that is fitting to serve, to exalt, to make his greatness known, and to do his commandments, which is already kind of interesting, kind of looking at what this list is. Is it, serving, is it a list of how do you serve Hashem and all these things are examples of it? Or is it more because serving kind of sounds like commandments, isn't that kind of the same thing? So, another way of looking at that is it might actually be something along the lines of being dedicated to serving Hashem, whether or not it was commanded. Something that the Rambam gets into a little bit more in Nevuchim, his son also talks about in his own works, is this idea that serving Hashem is something which is compelling, it's beyond reward, and it's beyond punishment. That the things that it's so true and correct, what Hashem wants us to do, is that even if we would be punished for it, you can imagine doing, keeping Shabbos, you'd be punished for it. It's so compelling that you should continue to do it, even if you're going to be punished for keeping the commandments. And I wonder if that's that idea, that sort of service. And it reminded me a little bit, I was thinking about this one, because that's kind of a hard idea to wrap your head around. It's I'll do it even if I'm going to get in the biggest trouble imaginable. And because it's not being rebellious. I mean, we're all rebellious and we do things against people, even out of showing you don't control me. But this is more. This is a moral act to do. And so it reminded me of a really cool book you guys should read. It's called Ordinary Men, and it's about in Nazi Germany how the vast majority of the horrible things that happened to Jews was really more orchestrated and organized by these police battalions. It was a bunch of these elderly, 40-year-old, 50-year-old men who, a lot of times they were not Naziized. They'd already gone through. They knew what it was like to be in a democratic state. A lot of these guys started out as even communists, something that the Nazis absolutely hated, probably more than Jews. They hated communists more. As well, a lot of these guys were communists serving in these battalions. And so there was, I'm trying to remember the number of the brigade. I think it was the 31st Brigade. I'm trying to remember that this book, Ordinary Men, is written about. And what it demonstrated, there was, in the very first operation that the battalion had, they'd go into cities and pull people out and do all the horrible things they would do with them. Well, in the first operation, through the very end, only one person said, I'm not going to do it. He didn't kill any Jews. He always shirked his responsibilities, and he was higher up, and as far as, he was kind of like an officer, so he can kind of get away with it also. But it turned out a lot of men, 10% of people were able to figure out how not to be involved in any way, shape, or form. And it was something 10% were really gunning for it, were really into this sort of work. And then everybody else kind of followed the crowd. That's the way this sort of broke up. And so it was kind of like this where, this guy, from beginning to end, he had every reason to do it. He's going to be punished for it. It turned out no one was ever punished for objecting, but he definitely socially ostracized and a lot of pressure. He was losing in a certain respect, but he didn't do it. No, I'm not going to do it. So it was his entire society, his entire world was demanding, no, this is a good thing to do. But he's no, not doing it. I think that's an example of this idea of serving, doing what's right, even though it might actually harm you, because it's above being harmed. The question is above reward and punishment. It's more than that. Though I try to remember this guy's name. Sorry, I'm not so on the ball today. But he was eventually captured by the Allies and he was executed. That was kind of the sad end of the story is the actual SS, because these battalions you'd have like 2 SS officers and everyone else would be civilians from police units. So like the SS officers like got like 3 years in jail, like in the 1970s when they finally caught up to them. But this guy immediately after the war was hung. Like he didn't kill a single Jew. His good he didn't get rewarded for his good deeds, but he still did it anyway, which is kind of the point. So I don't know. I'd offer that to you guys as something to think about. So anyway, so that's making a list here. This is how you're supposed to serve Hashem. The Rambam continues, and that you're not supposed to do this to that which is below Hashem in existence, meaning from the angels and the stars and the spheres and the elements and what which is composed of the elements. So those things we're not supposed to serve. Because as they are all designed, and there is no judgment and no free choice in their actions, only Hashem, may he be blessed, has free will. And that's what demands us to serve him. He has free will. And so too, it's not fitting to serve them in order that they be intermediaries to use them to bring you closer to Hashem. But rather you should just go straight for Hashem alone, no intermediaries whatsoever. And you should direct all your thoughts to Hashem and leave everything else to the side. And this 5th principle is that idolatry, worship of other things, is prohibited. And most of the Torah in all the different halachas are organized in a way that is prohibiting avodah zarah. Most halacha, so that's again another interesting thought to kind of, whenever you run into halachas, to kind of put that in your pocket. So that would be worthwhile in unpacking this guy to go to the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. He has a very long introduction to Hilchos Avodah Zarah, where he gives like a history lesson of how did Avodah Zarah develop. So Hilchos Avodah Zarah, the first two halachas. So the Rambam says like this, that idolatry started in this way. How did idolatry start? So it was giving honor to God's creations as these intermediaries, and eventually seeing them as the source of bracha, the source of the world itself. So it says, during the time of Enosh, he was generation number 3 of mankind. At that time, mankind made a great mistake, and the wise men of that generation gave thoughtless counsel. Enosh himself was one of those who made this mistake. So again, who's Enosh? Now, he was the son of Seth. Seth was the second, really the third son of Adam and Chava. Sefer Yashar, it's a midrashic work. It gives a little bit of symbolism to his name. Enosh means people. So it almost kind of like at this time in human history, it's like this Enosh is symbolizing this moment where people are transitioning from individuals into collectives. That kind of the one way of thinking about collectives is that it's a demand. A collective is where you have that the group is demanding organization around a single goal or a single purpose. So is it kind of like, are we going to be Hashem guys or are we going to be Avodah Zarah guys? It's kind of, what are we organizing ourselves around as a group? And the Chumash introduces Enosh with the pasuk that and Seth also had a son, was born to him, and he named him Enosh. Then, Hebrew word, huchal, to call by the name of Hashem. So the commentary is trying to figure out, well, what is this word? It's kind of a weird word. The Ibn Ezra understands that Hebrew word as meaning people beginning something. So the pasuk would be, and then the people began to call in the name of Hashem. So almost like what the collective is surrounding itself around is like a grassroots movement. It's not like from top down that he's looking at the creation of groups as something that everybody buys into. It's almost like a social contract sort of idea. Whereas the Sforno, he understands this word as beginning to preach. So it's then, the righteous ones, they began to preach in the name of the Lord. So like a top down. It's not a grassroots social contract sort of thing, but the way that groups are organized is around individuals. And in fact, that's kind of the idea of that book, Ordinary Men, is that most people are going to follow a few people. So you better pick the right people to follow. It's a dangerous fact of life. that large groups of people are very willing to follow someone who looks like he knows what he's doing. Does he actually know what he's doing? Okay, that's a different question. So that's Enosh. So the Rambam continues. So their mistake was as follows. They said, hey, well, God created stars and spheres with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. Accordingly, it's fitting to praise and glorify these things and to treat them with honor, and that they perceive this to be the will of God, that they might magnify and honor those whom Hashem magnified and honored, just as a king desires that his servants who stand before him be honored. So indeed, doing so is an expression of honor to the king. So the way Avodah Zarah started wasn't this sort of malignant, cancerous idea. People weren't really screwing up so bad because they actually wanted to serve Hashem and in their actions show that they honor God by honoring what God created. And it's kind of cool, this part of the Mishnah Torah is because it's very much highlighting how the world is predicated on cause and effect. There is such a thing as cause and effect in the world. And that's the tool, the mechanism Hashem uses in how he governs the world. You hear a lot about hashgacha pratis, right? Well, there's something called hashgacha klalit. Have you heard this one? This is how cause and effect work. That God creates a world in such a way that it goes about its business in an orderly fashion. That's what this idea of hashgacha klalit is. And it's kind of interesting, one thing that comes out of cause and effect is, the world is receptive to relationships. That's another way of thinking about cause and effect. So that's kind of an interesting thing because, the world in of itself is in relation to the Creator. So it's almost like, given that there is a relationship between Hashem and the world, that is cause and effect. That's the basis of cause and effect. And of course it'll spring up all over the place in every sort of, that's what science observes. Well, of course it's going to spring up because you have to have cause and effect to have relationship. How two things react to each other. That's really all cause and effect is. And the fact that, it does that consistently. Those two objects relate to each other in that consistent sort of way. So the Rambam goes on. So after conceiving of this notion, they began to construct temples to the stars and offer sacrifices to them. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so, they would, according to their false ideas, be fulfilling the will of God. So it's like a drama at this stage of the development of Avodah Zarah. The building of a temple, the praising and the acts of really be prostrating yourself is really laying your entire body out on the ground. Is that this is a drama. A lot of something worth noting. Especially when you get into more like esoteric stuff when it comes to the base of Mikdash. It's the same, or giving korbanos. The thing is a drama. It's acting out moral behaviors. It's acting out spiritual information, but it's for a pre-literate society in many ways. It's like something everyone can relate to, whether you're able to read or not, whether you're a smart person or not. Everybody appreciates a story. And so that's kind of the first concretization of Avodah Zarah is putting it into a story so that people can understand it better. There's this other idea. What's kavod? The Hebrew word kavod means giving weight to something. So you say in halacha, you see, how are you supposed to relate to somebody who is carrying a heavy burden? So you say you see someone who, one of these, poor ladies who are schlepping, the 5 kids in the stroller, they're going right up the street and you're coming down. Well, halacha would say, you get out of her way. She's carrying a heavy burden. So it's not just you don't want to be an obstacle to her. That's number one. But then there's this other idea of, you actually have an obligation to help people who are carrying their burden. So you have this with, Tzar Bali Chaim, different halachas about, animals, they drop, whatever. They have this, the archetypal example is the camel with all the bags on it. So, you see your buddy, the bags are falling off the camel's back. You're supposed to help him with the bags and put it back on. Well, that also applies to people. When you see someone carrying a heavy burden, it's actually a mitzvah to Tsar Bali Chaim. I mean, last time I checked, people are Chaim too. They're also alive. You're actually supposed to help them out and help them in their goals, what they're trying to accomplish. That's how you show kavod. It's getting out of people's way, recognizing what they're doing is difficult, and that this goal, which is difficult, it's worth doing to such an extent you help them out as well. That's how you show kavod. And it's also like that helping is making yourself subservient to that person. It's like, I didn't choose your goals, so man, whatever you're doing, fine. It wasn't my choice, but I'm going along with it anyway. So there's a certain level of loss of identity in these different halachas. So that's exactly, in terms of the concept of kavod, it's the same thing that you do with Hashem. Hashem's carrying a very heavy burden. The next glitch in this stage of the story is where humanity is making itself subservient to other created things. Now things are getting a little weird. Well, because all creatures are a revelation of Hashem, and people are a revelation of Hashem. We're all creatures of God. So there isn't, like, from this way of kind of looking at it, there's nothing prompting anybody to serve any particular object. I mean, what makes a star better than you? What makes a physical phenomenon more awe-inspiring than you? You're all just creatures of God. Worse than that, things aren't equal. We're not shaveh. We're not the same as other objects in the world. We're actually superior. And we have Tzelem Elokim. And we're created in the image of God. So if anything else, the world should be subservient to us, which is exactly the message in the beginning of Bereshis, that we were given the world and we're supposed to take command of it, guard it, and work it. We're in control. So it's not things are equal. So it's a two-step mistake that Avodah Zarah is putting into the world, this way of thinking. It's the de-deification of man. As a partner of creation, of having Tzelem Elokim, we're not gods, but like, we're kind of godly, like, that's better than squirrels by a lot. So, okay, fine, we're all, I don't know what a good way of thinking of that is, like mini deities, I don't know, like divine creatures. Well, that's kind of dangerous. Well, wouldn't it be dangerous to give kavod to people then? If we're not supposed to give kavod to the natural world, if the whole idea of Avodah Zarah is, shucky darn, you guys made a mistake. You gave kavod to all the things God created, so don't give kavod to people. Bigger problem, because we're actually quasi-deities. We have Tzelem Elokim. There's a larger risk of making a mistake with people than it is with the rest of the world. So why do we do that? And we definitely do that. Within halacha, we're obligated to give kavod. Parents and rabbis and people who do good deeds. I love this. Not a lot of people know this halacha. The same way you're supposed to stand up when a Talmid Chacham comes into a room. You're also supposed to stand up if someone who does a lot of chesed comes in the room. Say a social worker. That's a good example. So you stand up for a social worker. You stand up for someone who runs a tzedakah organization, just like you would for a rabbi. Same halacha. So you are supposed to show kavod. So it occurred to me, there's like two types of kavod. There's one that's hierarchical, and there's one that's more lateral. In the sense, the kavod we're supposed to show God is hierarchical. God is above us. That's actually the way it is. That he is objectively better in every way, shape, or form. And that was the kavod that was being given to the world. The world is above us. The world is better than who we are. But people are different because it's like the thinking of kavod in a lateral sense is people are so complex, you can't help but find something that another person's better at you in. There's thousands and thousands of hierarchies that a person can be at the top of, which just doesn't exist for the rest of the world. That's so it's like our divinity, our ability to be masters in different areas. It's like, I don't know, you meet someone who's really good at Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, well, okay, they have everything else not going well for them. I mean, they're kind of nerdy and like, good luck finding a date on Friday night. But thank God at least the guy is good at Dungeons and Dragons. And that's nothing to him. You guys play? I've never played it, but I'm sure I'd love it personally. It's like,
It's very fun.
is it? Yeah, it's a cool game, right? Yeah. There's a guy who comes into our.
I am a nerd. What are you gonna do about
Yeah,
it?
there's a guy that comes to our clinic, and his son is sorting things out, and so he's hanging out in the waiting room. This guy, and like he's like on the computer playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's a complicated game. It's like, man, like really involved. If not easy, you have to be highly creative, and most people aren't creative. It's like that guy is at the top of the heap when it comes to great Dungeons and Dragons. So there's always something to admire in a human being. So you never have this problem of someone is above you because, well, of course, everyone's above you and you're above other people in the same way in different areas. So I think that's what kind of, makes it less dangerous showing kavod to people. We're all great in different ways. So this giving kavod in this hierarchical sort of way to the world, well, we kind of got hit by two problems. One, we devalued people. We devalued ourselves. And we were obscuring our role, what we're meant to do as human beings. We're supposed to guard. We're supposed to work the world. That we're supposed to exert our creative control over what we've been given. But we're putting that into the hands of an avodah zarah, some other external thing. And it is kind of hard because, I am going on and on about, people are created in the divine image. Yeah, that's true. But, newsflash, we're also physical. The Rambam, in his commentary, the way that he understands let us make man, he said that's a conversation between God and the world. That there are so many things that influence us, the environment we're brought up in, our genetics, and they definitely influence us. But that's not all we are. So it's like, again, the avodah zarah is almost like that way of looking at humanity is only highlighting that one part. Yeah, genetics, yeah, environment, but disregards the free will aspect of what it means to be a person, what it means to be divine. The Rambam continues. So he says, after many years passed, there arose people who were false prophets, who told their nations that God had commanded them to say, hey, serve this star, or serve all the stars, and sacrifice to it. Offer libations. Build a temple for it, make an image of it, so that all the people, man, women, and children, all common folk, can bow to it. And he would inform them of a form that he had conceived and tell them that this is the image of the particular star, claiming that this was revealed to him in some sort of prophetic vision. And in this manner, the people began to make images of temples, under trees, on top of mountains and hills. People would gather together and bow down to them. And the false prophets would say, this image is the source of benefit or harm. It's appropriate to serve it and fear it. And their priests would tell them, this service will enable you to multiply and be successful. Do this and this, or don't do this and don't do that. They were using fear to control people. So subsequently, other deceivers arose and declared that a specific star, sphere, or angel had spoken to them and commanded them, serve me in this manner. He would then relate a mode of service, telling them, do this and do not do this. So we got a couple elements. One is this manipulative power grab. You got these cult leaders. I mentioned it was last week. one great example, Tony Robbins, like these motivational speakers, they're manipulating people. They have a narrative. They're usually selling fear. It's easy to sell fear. I mean, geez, we're all afraid. I mean, the world is filled with what to be afraid of. And the most scary things are probably ourselves. The problems we create for ourselves and the complicated lives that we lead. It's like there's a lot to be afraid of. So you don't have to be a genius to figure out what to promise people. Hey, you got a lot of problems. Just follow me. It'll all work out. That's exactly what these people do, like, say, Tony Robbins. They make problems sound, in one sense, too big to deal with, but then simplify them. It's like, yeah, but really it's not such a big deal. Buy my book. Might be expensive, but it's worth it. You can save yourself. So there's this manipulation. And the more that they're telling us what to do, the more advice they're giving, the more rules and regulations they're putting on us. Well, that's taking more and more of our free will away from us. We're giving up, the values that humanity started out with. I mean, that's kind of the narrative, is the more that we give power to other people, the more happily they're going to take power from us. They're going to take control of our lives. And it's also a manipulation of something that actually makes us amazing, is that we actually have feelings. Feelings are a very spiritual thing. They are observing the meaning in objects. That's what feelings do. They tell you what objects or other people or things or ideas are important or not. What is good and what is bad. What's worth, whether it's, anger, the feeling is telling you what's worth fighting for. Happiness is telling you, okay, man, this is safe. Sadness is something really was lost here and you have to sort yourself out and think about what your next move is, because you lost something big. You don't want to lose more. Like, feelings are telling you something. They're telling you what's important. And it's that greatness in man to have those feelings and be aware of them and to not let them just control you, but you actually can analyze them and look at them in the face. Well, that's being taken control of by these manipulators. The thing that makes us amazing, our ability to observe our feelings. Well, we're just giving that job to somebody else. Tell me what to feel and I'll follow you. Tell me how it should be. Okay, fine. You're the solution to fear? Great. And they end up telling you that there's, you end up having a couple fears and they end up telling you there's way more to be afraid of. So it's like you end up being more terrified than when you began with these characters. So that's one idea. The other element here is that I think there's a distinction between, serving the world and responding to it. Because we have to respond to the world. It demands us to do things or to not do things. Like, don't walk off the cliff. Like, that's true. But that doesn't mean you're serving the world. It just means that you're aware of what's in it. And so again, that distinction is being blurred when you're buying into an Avodah Zarah philosophy. Something I want to develop later as we go on is this. I was that's why I was asking about Esther earlier in the class. She was talking about, you guys had some rabbi who was saying, like demons and Avodah Zarah and stuff like are mental health problems. Well, I want to extend that. I don't think it's just mental health problems. I think it's every psychological process that was externalized. It's kind of like, he made me angry. It's that idea. What, he made you angry? There's a force. We have feelings, we have thoughts, but there's something that just wants us to make the world doing it. It's like, no, he didn't make you angry. You're angry. And so I think that lack of sophistication, that lack of seeing that distinction is the root of how Avodah Zarah developed as a system was trying to figure out meaning in the world without a single God. So we'll kind of get into that. It's a little spoiler alert there for upcoming classes. So Rambam continues. So thus these practices spread throughout the world. People would serve images with strange practices, one more distorted than the other. Others offer sacrifices to them and bow down to them. As the years passed, God's glorious and awesome name was forgotten by the entire population. It was no longer part of their speech or thought, and they no longer knew him. Thus, all the common people, women and children, would know only the image of wood or stone, and the temples of the stone to which they were trained from their childhood to bow down and serve, and in whose name they swore. What's kind of cool about this, if you get into mythology, anybody really into mythology? Yeah, what's really cool is every mythology usually has a creator god. And that creator god, you don't really hear so much about him. He's kind of hanging out in the background, doesn't really have a personality so much. It's usually God generation 3 or 4 when they start creating the world and having a good time. Either that first creator god is forgotten, or he's killed, he's destroyed in some way. So again, it kind of mirrors this idea of, once upon a time there was a creator god. We don't really know who that is, but generation 3 gods, we're into those guys, Similar thing. So the Rambam, this is the last section here of the Rambam I got here for you guys. So the wise men among them would think that there is no God other than the stars and spheres, for whose sake and the resemblance of which they had made these images. The eternal rock, Hashem, was not recognized or known by anyone in the world, with the exception of the few individuals, for example, Hanoch, Noah, Shem, Aver, all these guys. And the world continued in this fashion until the pillar of the world, the patriarch Avraham, was born. We have a vulnerability. I think the take-home message I want to give you guys today is that we have a vulnerability to Avodah Zarah. There's a tension between serving Hashem, on the one hand, but then falling into this trap of then personifying him, which in itself is limiting a God. That is the beginning of Avodah Zarah. Is this? Well, we kind of want to do it, and we are trying to relate to Hashem, and giving things a form makes things more compelling. I mean, so one idea in the Sefer Or Yisrael, Rabbi Yisrael Salant is talking about Yiras Hashem, fearing God, and well, God doesn't exist. He's not in a sense of being physical in any way. You don't see God. You don't feel God. So, how do you fear God? It's easier to fear a lion because the lion is there. It's, fearing Hashem is a choice people make. It's something that you have to build yourself into. So, a thing being in front of you is compelling. It's you want to have a spiritual experience. A lot of times with, modern spirituality, very much focuses around objects for this very reason, because it pulls you out. You just have to respond to it. So you have this tension where we want to relate to God, try not to personify him, but man, if you personify him, you'll for sure have a more immediately powerful religious experience. But I think that the reason it has to be this way, to have this tension, is because that's what enables free will. Okay, so why do we have to have this tension? It's an awkward position to be put in. And so I was thinking from a functional standpoint here, it's well, if we were responding to Hashem like a lion, well, there's not much free will there. In order to serve Hashem, it has to be more than a biological reflex. Free will has to be more than a biological reflex. So we're stuck in this problem. So this is kind of the only way out of that problem, is that we have to serve Hashem because we choose to, not because we must. We must run away from a lion. But having the same response to Hashem, that's what deprives free will. So I think that's the tension. That's the reason why this one's set up. It's not so convenient, but that's the way it is. So it's one of the primary reasons not to buy into physical manifestation of God, serving intermediaries from the very beginning. Not even to the point where we have actual idol worship. From the very beginning, that's prohibited from the Torah. A lot of people who very much, this is, we're kind of get into how we relate to angels and demons and all that sort of fun stuff in upcoming classes. But there's amongst many poskim, amongst any halachic decisors, to not sing Shalom Aleichem on Shabbos, because we ask the angels to bless us in the third stanza. Well, I'm not doing that. I actually don't on principle. The Chasam Sofer also didn't. For this reason, don't serve other things. That's the entry into Avodah Zarah. That's the moment you're giving up your free will, where it becomes a reflex to the environment. Oh, there's angels. And you see this, the way people act is like segulas, angels. Oh, really? Wow, a segula. Like people, like it's like they're. It's like you're banging on their knee and they're just kicking. It's like a reflex. Someone says segula, everyone's head snaps around. That's not free will. So that's why the Rambam, he's very, very strict on this one. So don't come near it. You want to have pure free will, pure intention in serving God. Nothing between you and him. Not the slightest thing. So there's a medrash, Bereshis Rabbah, that says, again, at the time that Enosh came on the scene, was the moment in human history people started to become possessed by demons. Ooh. What does that mean? What's a demon? I think that a demon is just a chaotic biological process. It's a reflex. It's a reflex to chaos. It's like a fear response almost. Or it's more of a, it's the being overcome by one's biological nature. I think that's really all it is. But, like I said, we'll get more into that. Make things a little more complicated with Avodah Zarah and the way people are. But that's something to think about. The more religious we become sometimes actually deprives us of the ability to have a relationship with God. So watch out.